Hello, my fellow minor league nerds. Welcome to our newest Mostly Forgotten Teams episode, our series about teams you may have heard of, but probably haven't. Today's team is the Rocky Mount Pines. Rocky Mount. Is that supposed to say Rocky Mountain? No, they played in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. The Rocky Mount Pines were a 1980 one-year wonder in the Single-A Carolina League. For the few who remember them, they are best remembered for going 24, 114, and 1 overall, for a 174 winning percentage, finishing 59 games behind the first-place Durham Bulls, who won both halves of the North Division that year, and 45 games behind the Kinston Eagles, who finished the division in third place overall. The Pines broke the previous record of 106 losses in the Carolina League. They were independent, with no major league parent club, which is one of the reasons they were so awful. They were owned by 63-year-old Lou Henellis of Miami, who played 8 minor league seasons, 3 of which he served as player-manager. He operated a handful of low-level minor league teams, which he usually ran as independents, stocking them with hopeful amateur ball players from his chain of instructional baseball schools. In 1979, he owned the Newark Co-Pilots of Newark, New York, who played in the short-season New York Penn League. Jim Mills, president of the Carolina League at the time, approached the Co-Pilots manager Mal Fitchman about moving up a level. The league was looking to expand from 6 to 8 teams, and they were interested in having Henellis and Fitchman lead one of the new teams. They both liked the idea of moving up to a tougher league, so Henellis folded the Co-Pilots and launched the Pines. Municipal Stadium in Rocky Mount had been sitting empty. It last hosted a Carolina League team from 1962 to 1975, which played as the Leafs, Senators, and Phillies. After a few more name and location changes, that team is today known as the Wilmington Blue Rocks. Fitchman was able to put together a roster made up of 5 former co-pilots and 8 players who were signed from the 650 who paid $220 each to attend one of the instructional schools they held in Ocala, Florida, and Rocky Mount. The rest came from spring training camp cuts from various major league teams. Each player was given a contract that paid the minor league minimum at the time, $325 a month, or just over $1,200 today. They lost their first game to the Kinston Eagles 4-2 in Kinston, North Carolina, with their home opener being rained out. Throughout the season, they lost games convincingly and with remarkable consistency. In the first half of the season, they went 14-55, finishing 27.5 games out of first place. In the second half, they went 10-59. Their longest losing streak was 18 games, with their longest win streak, which wasn't accomplished until June 11th, being 2. After that 2-game win streak, they lost the next game 13-0. They were no-hit once by Rick Behenna of the Durham Bulls on August 29th. Rocky Mount was no stranger to athletic misfortune. In 1909 and 1910, Jim Thorpe played for the city's first professional team, the Railroaders of the Eastern Carolina League. He was reportedly paid as little as $2 a game, $63 today, and as much as $35 a week, $1,100 today. Playing those games ended up costing him his amateur status and his 2 Olympic gold medals. Oddly, the terrible results on the field didn't actually pull the team apart, but instead brought them together. The players didn't blame each other for their poor play. They put the blame where it belonged, on their lack of depth. Individually, they all played hard, hoping a major league team would notice and pick them up. They just weren't deep. While the league permitted 25 players, Henellis limited the roster to only 21. In the last week of the season, their bullpen was down to just 2 pitchers. Reliever Mike Brown would set a league record with 78 appearances. The next closest was Martin Rivas of the Winston-Salem Red Sox with 56. Brown was quoted in Sports Illustrated as saying, "The best thing that happened to this club all year was when the team bus broke down outside a massage parlor on the way to Winston-Salem." The players liked and respected their manager, Mal Fitchman, and he cared for them. He was known as a tough, old-school manager who was just as likely to blow up at a player for missing a sign as he was to pay a player from his own pocket after a bounced check. When the season began, the team had a full-time employee who worked in a front office role, communicating with the league offices and filling out paperwork. Early on, though, she quit, forcing Fitchman to take on that role as well, meaning he was a one-man operation for most of the season. After one horrendous stretch in May, Fitchman stood up in the team bus and announced that anyone not in the hotel bar in 25 minutes would be fined $25, which was 2.5 days' pay. Some $400 of Fitchman's own money later, the team closed the joint. That would be almost $1,500 today. The high point of the season came during the first game of the second half, when a 10th-inning walk-off walk had them tied for first place. For one day. Things returned to normal when they went on to lose 18 straight games, one shy of the league record. The team was not popular in Rocky Mount. Only 26,702 fans showed up for games, of which nearly half the tickets were given away for free. Advertising on the outfield walls did not sell, and there was practically no local media coverage. What little there was usually took delight in how awful they were. They shared Municipal Stadium with Rocky Mount Senior High School's team, who was led that year by Bill Merrifield, a future Wake Forest standout and whose son, Whit, played for the Kansas City Royals and Toronto Blue Jays. The stadium was owned by the high school, so its team took precedence in scheduling. So many Pines games had their start times delayed. One game in May wasn't able to start until 8:45 p.m. Some 12 innings later, at 12:45 a.m., the score was tied 7-7. Mal Fitchman put his foot down and play was suspended. The headline in the next day's paper read, "Hey, the Pines didn't lose." Henellis, who was very thrifty with his money, never attended a single Pines game. He threatened to fold the team on June 4th if expenses weren't cut. He also attempted to move them to Hagerstown, Maryland, and wanted to get rid of the team's trainer and slash the roster to 16 players. Moves Fitchman was able to block by taking a 25% pay cut. At one point, he even refused to pay the players' salaries, leading them to almost quitting. A team meeting was called, but they realized there was nowhere else for them to go if they wanted to keep playing ball, so they voted to stay and play. They did receive some help when Pittsburgh and Boston sent them 5 players who weren't getting the chance to play every day. Toward the end of the season, the Carolina League was helping to prop up the team financially, in the interest of fielding home games for the league's other teams. In all, 37 players played for the Pines, with all but one being considered a professional ball player. The lone non-pro was Bob Bill, the team's trainer, who ended up playing one game for the team because they were short on players. In December 1980, the Carolina League revoked the franchise and sold it to Lou Eliopoulos, who immediately relocated it to Hagerstown, Maryland, to become the first incarnation of the Hagerstown Suns, later becoming the Frederick Keys, and leaving behind $7,000 of unpaid bills. Lou Henellis, who claimed he lost $80,000 on the team, responded by suing everyone he could: the Carolina League, Mills, the governing body of minor league baseball, its president and MLB commissioner, Bowie Kuhn. He sought $5 million in damages for restraint of trade and violation of antitrust laws. The case did not go Henellis' way. U.S. District Court Judge George Carr in Tampa, Florida, gave a gloomy assessment of Henellis's legal prospects, stating that his likelihood of prevailing on the merits is somewhat less than the likelihood of the Rocky Mount Pines prevailing over the opposition during this past season. Henellis passed away in 2006 and was still making threats against the Carolina League in the last years of his life. None of the 37 players who played for the Pines made it to the major leagues, though catcher David Littlefield, who played 11 games for them, would serve as the general manager for the Pittsburgh Pirates from 2001 to 2007. Mal Fitchman wouldn't manage again until 1987, when he became the first manager of the Boise Hawks, leading the team until 1989. He would manage 2 more affiliated teams, the Erie Sailors in the New York Penn League in 1990 and the Reno Silver Sox in the California League in 1991, before moving on to independent ball, where he would lead 3 different teams to a Frontier League championships in 3 consecutive seasons: the Erie Sailors in 1994, the Johnstown Steel in 1995, and the Springfield Capitals in 1996. He would later become a scout for the San Diego Padres and Philadelphia Phillies, helping more than 160 independent players get contracts in affiliated ball, with 17 ultimately reaching the majors. Professional baseball never returned to Rocky Mount, but they did have a Coastal Plain League team in 1997 and 1998, who played as the Rocky Mount Rockfish. Well, my fellow minor league nerds, that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for nerding out with me. And as always, keep on supporting minor league baseball and never stop learning about minor league baseball history.